What's going on, guys? I'm Tyler, and I'm here to let you know that Nope is no perfect movie. Nifty. So Nope stars Daniel Kaluuya and Keke Palmer as the Haywood siblings who help their father operate a Hollywood ranch where they train horses for movies and TV shows until one day, debris supposedly falling from a private airplane accidentally strikes and kills their father. But months later, they spot a UFO on their ranch that they realize is responsible for his death, and they enlist the help of a tech salesman played by Perea and a cinematographer played by Wincott to capture evidence and find a way to defeat this alien once it starts attacking the town. Now, out of all three Jordan Peele films, Get Out is the one that still holds up in my opinion, because when I first saw it in theaters, I did enjoy it, but it wasn't until I started rewatching certain clips on YouTube and I discovered hidden meanings and visual metaphors like the deer on the deer head on the wall, how it was supposed to be symbolic of Chris's rise against racist America by taking it and literally stabbing people with the antlers, which was such a rewarding moment, even though I was sitting next to a mother and an 8 and 10-year-old boy in the theater. Needless to say, everything that I picked up on second viewing in terms of foreshadowing made me appreciate Jordan Peele a hell of a lot more as a director. Us was an opposite experience where when I first saw it with a group of coworkers, we all liked it and we had fun deciphering the hidden meanings like the use of rabbits or the one Michael Jackson glove that was supposed to tell who was the doppelganger and who was the real person. That stuff was fun. We made up our own Facebook Messenger group to decipher more clues like that once we left the theater. But months later, when it came out on streaming and we all watched it individually, we realized that with no more metaphors to pick up, it just wasn't that fun anymore. All the suspense had completely dissipated, and even though I was excited to check out this movie based on the trailer where it presented this large-scale Western atmosphere along with being a sci-fi horror, all of the alien activity was kept off-screen, kind of like how in the Jurassic Park trailers where Spielberg roped us in by having characters react in awe and horror to the dinosaurs off-screen to rope us in, have that element of mystery. That stuff was really cool, but I was already starting to get worried that Peele might be repeating himself as a filmmaker and getting pretty predictable, and not gonna lie, I didn't have a good time with Nope. I think it is Peele's worst film, and whereas Get Out and Us were incredibly simple stories to follow and had basic, endearing messages, for the life of me, I had to look up a lot of details as to what was actually going on in this movie, what the messages were supposed to be, how these minor subplots and foreshadowing hints had any connection to each other, if at all, or why I was even supposed to care about these characters in the first place. But in terms of positives, the cinematographer for this was Hoyt van Hoytema, who is now Christopher Nolan's preferred cinematographer working on Dunkirk and Tenet. So you already know that this is going to be a visually impressive movie. You can tell that this was filmed on 65mm and IMAX based on the massive, beautiful landscapes of California that are great to look at, but can also add to the horror elements by making the aliens look larger in scope, more intimidating a threat. And the fact that there's all of this vast empty space on the ranch that kind of looks more like a desert, it can supposedly make the characters' lives more dangerous because they have absolutely nowhere to hide other than their house, their car, or this one barn where they keep the horses. I do like that as opposed to constantly showing what the aliens look like and letting us know early on what they're capable of, therefore taking any element of surprise away. Peele makes the wise choice of revealing what the aliens are, how their anatomy works, what exactly they want with us in the first place, in small steps with each UFO sighting that, for the most part, all of them play out mainly in silence, where the camera will start off showing a character staring off into the sky, investigating what's going on. Then the camera will quickly pan over to the sky where we see or hear something spooky happen, and then it will pan back to the character's horrified reactions to it, kind of like a Spielberg wonder. And you can definitely tell that Peele's direction and cinematography is supposed to evoke classic Spielberg films like Jaws or Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which I've seen Close Encounters on at the movie theater during its 40th anniversary, which one of the best theatrical experiences I will ever have. And it certainly definitely captures the look of it. I wouldn't say it captures the feeling towards it whatsoever, and I'll get into that later, but I do like that Peele tries to tell as many scenes as possible through master shots where every character or every hidden MacGuffin within that scene is in full view. So your eyes are constantly going left and right in anticipation of what the characters are going to say or what they're going to discover. If they're hiding in this one spot from danger and there's all this wide open space in the background or in the foreground, your eyes are glued to the screen in anticipation of something about to pop out and supposedly kill them. This all sounds very exciting, but the reason the horror sequences never really scared me all that much were mainly revolving around the pacing and the editing. The length of certain shots will be drawn out for so long when nothing happens and you've been staring at these guys waiting for an alien to pop out for way too long that any of the tension that was built up beforehand completely disappears. Or, this happened a lot more, and this pissed me off the most, as soon as you see a flying saucer or an alien and you see the characters' reactions, as opposed to constantly wondering what they're about to do, the scene will just instantly cut away to something else that's going on in the meantime that is nowhere near as scary. Or in some cases, it'll even cut away to the next day or a flashback that is supposedly supposed to give us information. And it was a complete and utter buzzkill. I understand that Jordan Peele is more interested in psychological horror, where it's the ideas, the thoughts and feelings of the character that's supposed to scare us more than the imagery. You know, do aliens really exist? If so, what do they want with us? Are they friends or foe? Those are all really scary ideas. But Get Out, in my opinion, wasn't scary just because a character was facing racism or perceived judgment based on his skin color. There was a lot of creepy imagery that elevated those themes. The silent auction where they're bidding over a man's life, that was fucking terrifying. The scene where Chris leaves the party and goes off on his own to make a phone call, everyone stops their fake conversations and starts staring at him in silence. Like, that was really creepy. That added a lot to the atmosphere. And I also like that with Get Out, Peele picked the perfect moments on whether to depict the violence, like when Chris does get his revenge on the family, or by mostly leaving it off screen where characters can react to it in horror and you listen to it with nothing more than realistic sound effects. In fact, the nicest thing I can say about Nope is that when I was startled, the horror sequences didn't rely so much on music, more on realistic sound effects that could happen when someone is being stabbed or pulled out from the sky, where you have things like ominous wind that comes from a flying saucer abducting something and the sand and the dust that flies around with it. But that was really about it. The imagery in this movie just isn't scary enough because, as I said before, it's not presented on screen enough for us to really get sucked in. A lot of UFO sightings tend to repeat themselves in terms of how a character spots them, what they do when they react, how far do they run, and whether or not something actually does get abducted in the process. And when we do finally see the aliens in full view during the finale, I don't get it. The alien design, once we see it, looks a lot more beautiful than it does frightening. And I can't get too specific into why I feel that way, but it felt pretty disappointing at the very end. And as for story structure, Jordan Peele already has his own signature style and set of tropes that comes from dissecting Us and Get Out. And I already kind of had that pinpointed before I even saw Nope. You know that there's going to be a family dynamic that's interrupted when something or someone appears and instantly interferes with their way of life. In Get Out, it was Chris getting involved with their organ trafficking. With Us, it was the doppelgangers attacking the family. And in this one, it's aliens attacking a family. You know that there are going to be animals that serve as a metaphor for the film. In Get Out, it was a deer. In Us, it was rabbits. In Nope, it's horses. And chances are, in every movie, Peele voices an animal that dies for the sake of symbolism. And as I said before, there are a lot of foreshadowed subtle hints or not so subtle hints that give us a little idea of what's to come towards the end of the film, but also serve as political satire. And with Get Out and Us, the political satire was incredibly obvious to follow, mainly because you see these messages about race and class in nearly every movie in existence nowadays, and I love that people are acting surprised and acting like this is a brand new thing for cinema. It's not. We've had movies about race and class conflict. Why am I stuttering? Ever since the 1950s, at the very least. And look, I get that it's easy to disregard those movies just because it was objectively a worse and more racist time, but I can't believe I'm saying this. Those movies back then were actually better at addressing race and class conflict than what we do now, because it actually looked at both sides. It actually examined why good people and bad people exist and why they're in conflict with each other. As opposed to now, where the messages in modern movies are about why it's bad and why it needs to be stopped, as opposed to why it exists and how can you stop it. It's actually pretty pathetic at this point, but Get Out and Us, very simple, very straightforward. You could tell what Peele was trying to say, without it getting in the way of the entertainment value. I honestly couldn't tell you that the modern obsession with spectacle was supposed to be the theme of this movie without looking up Jordan Peele interviews of him flat out saying it, because he's not actually good at leaving stuff up to interpretation. He actually wants you to know what the themes of this movie are about, which I don't really understand. But, yeah, it's weird that I didn't pick up on the spectacle metaphor, seeing as how the movie literally starts with a quote about spectacle. The horses in this movie are obviously supposed to be a metaphor for people or things that are used for entertainment with no regard for their well-being whatsoever. And the story is about a group of people trying to capture evidence of a UFO in as crystal clear as cinematic an image as possible. And I think the main reason that I didn't pick up on the satire was because traditionally satire in movies are supposed to be told through the characters, through their development. These are not well-developed characters. These are characters who have very little chemistry with one another. And I can't believe I'm saying this because Jordan Peele is good at directing actors, but he gets a lot of awkward and lifeless performances from his cast members. Every time Daniel Kaluuya, who almost got an Oscar from Jordan Peele, who got his career from Jordan Peele, and does have an Oscar from a movie that I wasn't a fan of, but I do acknowledge he was great in it and definitely deserved the award. Every time I saw him in Nope, I looked at him and I said, dude, would it kill you to show a little bit emotion? I get that he's supposed to be that kind of character who was so traumatized by what's happened to him that he's silent and stoic throughout the majority of the film, but there are two things that are wrong with that. First of all, we see what he's like in a flashback before his father is killed, literally right before his father is killed. We get 2 minutes of him talking with his dad, and he's just as unresponsive and timid as he was before. There's literally no change between before his dad dying and his death and afterwards in terms of his behavior, in terms of his mannerisms with other people, in terms of his body language. So when you see the before and after, you don't really feel like his dad's death really affects him all that much. You don't even see him cry when it happens. And second of all, when there is a flying saucer in the vicinity of your home, things that you had no idea existed in the first place, are abducting horses that you are trying to sell in order to get out of debt, or horses that you care about in the first place and are not going to sell at all, and are trying to attack your house and your family, I would expect you to have more than one facial expression. But that doesn't happen. He's actually less freaked out by aliens existing than Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones combined, and that's really saying something. And it doesn't help that out of all the main characters in this movie, he's the one that you learn the least about. I honestly couldn't tell you a thing about his arc. I couldn't explain to you why he doesn't really seem all that invested in the family business, and yet he attends to his daily routine of feeding and training horses anyways, as if it's a moral obligation. The only thing I can definitely tell you for sure is that his name is OJ. I'm not kidding, folks. Our main character is a guy named OJ. And yes, they do make fun of it once or twice, but I mean, it's an easy fix that could have been avoided. Just call yourself Junior. Just call yourself JR or J for Junior. Problem solved. I mean, when the finale of your movie is a black man named OJ riding a Bronco on a highway to escape from something that is trying to capture you, that scenario alone is funnier than any of the comedy within this film. And the weird thing is, you're not even supposed to laugh at that. Or maybe you are. I mean, the way Jordan Peele foreshadows shit, I wouldn't be surprised if you were supposed to laugh at that in the first place. Keke Palmer is someone who I'm glad has a career again. I look forward to seeing what she does in the future, but I gotta be honest, with this and the projects that she's worked on with Disney, she's not off to a good start. I will say that she's probably the one character in this movie that gets the most development, where she starts off hanging on to nostalgia of the family ranch while also refusing to take any responsibility for it, until the aliens come down, start attacking, that serve as her wake-up call to start working with her brother again and to fight for what's theirs. But what made her so insufferable was just how talkative and very hypocritical of a character she was. It's not her fault that she's this annoying. Keke Palmer is technically giving a good performance with what she's given, but she's given so much terrible material to work with that never lands a laugh. Peele is so convinced that it's still funny for complete and utter losers or insufferable idiots to ramble non-stop until everybody else stares at them to shut them up. It's not funny anymore. I saw this with like 14 other people, and there was a lot of dead silence during the comedy. The most I could hear from people were chuckling, and once in a while I saw someone smile, but it wasn't loud enough to be a genuine laugh. Out of all the characters, she's the one who title drops the movie the most in every scene by repeating it over and over again when it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. The examples of flaws that she's supposed to overcome throughout the course of her arc were so unlikable that it was hard to get past that. During the first scene, where the only time you actually see them operate on a movie set, the two of them are so bad at their job. She avoids meetings, she's late for them. Whenever he needs her help in explaining a stunt to someone, she actually deliberately takes her time avoiding it. She sums up the rules of training animals on set in a matter of like 3 sentences. And I love that the scene is supposed to make OJ and her character Emerald out to be the victims of the scene because nobody is listening to them whatsoever. And I get the message is the crew is white and the two of them are black, but I'm sorry. OJ and Emerald suck at their job and they're completely useless without their old man, even though we see the old man for like 2 scenes tops. And I just gotta say on top of that, for someone who is picking and choosing her career choices based on what serves the message, I find it interesting that she wants to play a character who has no problem stealing property from other people in order to help their UFO investigation before the shit really hits the fan, and it's played up for comedy as opposed to it being presented as an actual flaw. And the last gripe that I will have with this movie are the side characters. I have no idea why they're in this movie. They have no chemistry with the Haywoods, let alone with each other. The sequences where they're trying to formulate a plan in terms of what are the alien strengths and weaknesses, how they're supposed to capture evidence of this thing and supposedly kill it, I had no idea where they got all of this information. Mainly because the one way to survive this alien is by not looking at it in the eyes. One would think that would stop them from getting all of this information about how to hunt and kill this thing. But the worst thing about it is, after seeing their final plan, which made absolutely no sense and went wrong in so many predictable ways, or in a completely pointless Deus Ex Machina that I don't want to ruin, if you were to write out Steven Yeun, Michael Wincott, and make Daniel Perea a small cameo, absolutely nothing would change whatsoever. Perea is just there to take over from comic relief from Keke Palmer, and the tech services that he does after he installs security cameras on the ranch, anyone else could have done, as opposed to him sticking around making a bunch of cheap jokes that never got a laugh. Michael Wincott was someone I was really looking forward to checking out because I saw him as a kid as Captain Roquefort in the 90s Three Musketeers, and his voice makes his character so interesting. I don't know if it's a natural thing or if he works on it, but it's a great feature. He doesn't get enough credit or roles. I was really looking forward to seeing him supposedly branch out, but I don't know if it was the speakers in my theater, the sound mixing in the movie, or his performance, but his voice was so muddled, and it didn't help that his character spoke in a lot of cryptic riddles for no reason whatsoever. He was really hard to follow. I couldn't understand his lines whatsoever. There were Nolan movies where I could understand it on first viewing a hell of a lot better than his work in this. And Steven Yeun, biggest disappointment in this movie because his backstory had the scariest scenes. It had the most intriguing cryptic clues as opposed to supposedly what these aliens are doing on Earth, what they want with the people, how it connects to him. He has probably the one sequence where I was actually terrified involving a chimpanzee on a soundstage. Everything I wanted from this movie in terms of horror was in that scene. The problem is, it doesn't connect with what the Haywoods are experiencing. None of the clues that are presented in his sequences ever come back into fruition. The lady who's a spectator in his crowd with the fucked up mouth, she's literally in that one scene. It felt like she was in that one shot alone. You never see her again, and there's a scene in the trailer where a guy is silently and happily walking away from a crowd, running away from a flying saucer, and I'm willing to bet that he was supposed to be an alien spy or something like that, but again, it never comes back into the story. And the reason it's so confusing is because his backstory revolving around the chimpanzee is literally the first scene in the movie. One would think that would tie into what is actually going on, but the entities that he comes across look absolutely nothing like the aliens that the Haywoods encounter. There are no hints whatsoever as to how it connects because the Haywoods themselves have no idea, have never witnessed this stuff before. I've rambled nonstop about this movie for a good 24 minutes at this point, and that's mainly because Nope is just a huge missed opportunity. The writing is messy. The performances are extremely hit and miss. The direction and cinematography are decent, but the editing tends to fuck up the horror atmosphere that could come from something that blends science fiction, psychological horror, and westerns. This should have been a hell of a lot better. And even though I gave you reasons why I didn't like it, I still don't understand why it turned out this bad. So, in order to cut this short, or, well, it's too late to cut it short, I'm going to give Nope a 2 out of 5. Guys, thanks as always for watching. If you have seen Nope, if you like it, if you agree with me that you thought it was a little overrated and completely disappointing, either case, let me know in the comments below what you thought of it, what you thought some of the hidden metaphors meant in terms of the themes. Be sure to stay tuned for more reviews, and be sure to like and subscribe. Take care.